If part one was about understanding how a single regional crisis can ripple through the global economy, part two is about understanding what happens after those ripples begin. Because once the markets react and the government don't simply stand by and watch central banks, military alliances, intelligence agencies, multinational corporations, shipping companies, energy producers, and financial institutions all begin to making decisions at nearly the same time. Those decisions influence one another, creating a chain reaction that can either calm a crisis or unintentionally make it worse. One of the greatest misconceptions about international politics is that the governments always control events. In reality, the governments often spend just as much time reacting to events as they do shaping them. Military commanders respond to the intelligence, and financial markets respond to the military deployments. The political leaders respond to voters. Businesses respond to changing prices, and consumers respond to the uncertainty. Every decision triggers another response somewhere else, creating a feedback loop that becomes increasingly difficult to predict. So let's think of the global systems as an enormous web. Pull one strand, and the vibration spreads throughout the entire structure. A missile launch affects shipping, and the shipping affects insurance. The insurance affects transportation costs, and the transportation affects the manufacturers. The manufacturers affect the retailers. The retailers affect the consumers, and the consumers change spending habits. Investors notice those changes. Markets respond. Governments then react to the markets, creating an entirely new cycle of decision making. Now, this is one reason the financial markets are often described as forward looking investors aren't buying today's economy. They're buying the expectations about tomorrow's economy. If the traders believe the oil supplies could become tighter 6 months from now, prices may begin moving today. If they believe the governments will impose the sanctions and strengthen military deployments or restrict export markets or attempt to price those possibilities before they actually occur, sometimes those expectations prove correct. Other times they don't, but the anticipation itself can reshape the economic behavior long before reality catches up. Military planners operate under a similar principle as well. They cannot afford to wait until every threat becomes certain, but instead they prepare for multiple possibilities at once. They evaluate the intelligence and monitor troop movements and analyze the satellite images and study diplomatic signals while constantly updating the contingency plans. And most of that work happens quietly without, the public's attention, but it plays a critical role in reducing the uncertainty during international crises. The diplomacy often follows the same pattern. While the headlines focus on public speeches and televised meetings, much of international diplomacy happens behind closed doors. The ambassadors communicate privately, intelligence officers exchange information, military leaders establish communication channels to reduce the risk of misunderstanding. Allies coordinate responses, and even countries with serious disagreements frequently maintain some level of communication because preventing accidental escalation, it can be just as important as, resolving the underlying disputes. And history offers many examples of moments when the careful diplomacy helped prevent much larger conflicts. During periods of intense geopolitical tensions, the leaders have sometimes chosen negotiations over the confrontation, recognizing that the miscalculation can be just as dangerous as deliberate aggression. That doesn't mean diplomacy always succeeds, but it illustrates why the governments often keep multiple options open simultaneously while combining military preparedness with ongoing diplomatic efforts. And then, meanwhile, multinational corporations make their own calculations. The energy companies evaluate the production levels and transportation routes. Shipping firms decide whether the vessels should avoid higher risk areas, and the airlines reconsider flight paths. The manufacturers diversify suppliers when possible, attempting to reduce the dependence on any single report or region. These decisions may appear technical, but collectively they influence global trade, consumer prices, and economic stability. The central banks also monitor these developments closely. While they don't direct military strategy or foreign policy, they are responsible for maintaining price stability and supporting economic confidence. And if higher energy prices had contributed to the inflation, the policymakers may face difficult choices about the interest rates and the monetary policy. The decisions made by the central banks can influence borrowing costs, business investments in housing markets, and consumer spending as well, all demonstrating how a geopolitical event can eventually reach the families who never follow international news. This interconnectedness is one of the defining characteristics of the modern world. A conflict in one region may affect the shipping routes in another commodity price or another continent, manufacturing the schedule somewhere else, and household budgets thousands of miles away. The geography still matters. The technology, trade, and finance have connected the nations more closely than at any other point in history. And the digital age has added another layer of complexity. With the information now that moves almost instantly, the news reports, official statements, the satellite imagery, and social media posts can influence the public's perception within minutes. And that speed has many advantages, but it also means that the rumors are incomplete and the information can spread rapidly. During periods of uncertainty, distinguishing verified information from speculation becomes increasingly important. The markets, governments, and citizens all benefit from accurate information, especially when the emotions are running high. The public confidence is often an overlooked factor, but during international crises, especially, economies don't function on numbers alone. They also rely on the trust that the financial institutions remain stable, the trust that the supply chains continue operating, and the trust that the governments can respond effectively. Now, when confidence weakens, the people and businesses sometimes change their behavior in ways that amplify the economic challenges. Companies may delay the hiring or investment. Consumers may postpone the major purchases, and investors may seek safer assets. Each decision does appear rational on its own, but together they can slow the economic activity. At the same time, the history shows that economies are remarkably resilient. The supply chains adapt, businesses find alternative suppliers, and shipping routes change. Energy producers increase or decrease the output, and the governments negotiate agreements. Markets eventually adjust to the new conditions, while disruptions can be significant, and they often encourage the innovation and long-term adaptation. Resilience is another one reason the global economy has reportedly recovered from wars, or had repeatedly recovered from wars, financial crises, pandemics, and energy shocks throughout modern history. And the broader question, however, extends beyond the economics. It concerns the balance of the global power itself. As nations invest in new technologies, strengthen our alliances, and they compete for influence, the international politics continues evolving. Energy remains an important factor, but it now intersects with the cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, the critical minerals, and advanced manufacturing and emerging technologies. The countries that successfully manage these challenges may shape the international system for decades to come. And that raises a final question for this chapter. Are today's tensions simply another difficult period that the international community will eventually overcome? Or are they part of a larger transition toward a different geopolitical era? Historians often recognize the major turning points only after they've already occurred. People living through them, they usually experience uncertainty, debate, and conflicting interpretations rather than the clear answers. As we continue this documentary, we'll examine those larger questions, and we'll look at shifting alliances, changing the economic relationship, technological competition, and the long-term trends that may redefine the global politics in the 21st century. Understanding today's headlines also requires understanding the broader forces shaping tomorrow's world. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Unfiltered Political Lens. In part 3, we'll explore whether the world is entering a new era of great power competition, how the emerging technologies and strategic resources are changing international relations, and what these developments could mean for the future of global stability. And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.